What's going on, you guys? I'm here about to do a build video with the QAV S2 by Lumineer and Joshua Barwell. And I'm also going to be doing a head tracking build from, this is a head tracking gimbal from Medlindron. Shout out to Medlindron. He makes a pre-built head tracking gimbal that will move with the goggles when you move while you fly. The QAV S2 is one of my favorite frames. It caught my eye just because it's purple and that's my favorite color. And so I already built one here, and this has been through a lot. And this is my baby. I love this thing so much. So I was like, why not build another one, right? So we're gonna go ahead and start with that right now. I've gone with these Velox 2206 T-motor motors. T-motor is my favorite. That's what you'll see on most all of my dreams. Comes with a little instruction paper that just walks through how to put the frame together, and that's really nice. We're just gonna use this because I honestly can't remember everything. First thing you're gonna want to do is grab the split rear plate. This part of the frame is gonna have these little ridges right here. You'll notice you're gonna want to line up the holes on the X-lock with that basically. So you want to make sure that the holes on the X-lock are pointed on the outside. The M3 screws, 22 millimeters, you're gonna want to use that for your stack. I have a 20 by 20, so I'm putting in the smaller holes. It also comes with these mini screws for the X-lock. And I'm assuming that's just to completely lock these down. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add them in. So we got those screws in. So the next step is to actually put on the arms. So the X-lock comes with this little piece that you wedge in after the arms. It's gonna go like that. Once you have your arms set up, you're gonna wedge the purple piece in between the arms like that. You're going to take this screw and put it through to the X-lock. And that will actually keep the arms in place, like so. We got all the arms on. We're going to grab our other rear plate. And I think all we're going to do here is line it up, the middle screw on there. You just line it up with the middle of the X. 6mm M3 screws, and you're just gonna want to use one of them to put this rear plate on real quick. So I like to use the sticky grip from Oh My God. This is purple, obviously, and it's actually laser cut. I don't know if you guys can tell. This is laser cut by Brain 3D. Shout out to Brain 3D. I usually actually cut this myself. For this drone, I actually cut this sticky grip myself, which is probably surprising. I have to put the gimbal on top plate now. I am going to go ahead and slap this on. This part up. Wow, that's awesome. I didn't even have to do much. I just slapped it on. 4 screws in the bottom here. So what I'm going to do is Medlindron himself actually suggested when you put the top plate on the gimbal, you screw the standoffs in that way after you put the top plate on. So since I got my standoffs on here already, I'm just gonna do the rest on the drone how you regularly would. So for these arm holes, you're gonna want to use M3 16mm screws. So once you got your screws on there, you're gonna grab some standoffs. The standoffs on the rear are gonna need the 6 millimeter screw. Install the cable plates next, and I think that calls for the 6 millimeter as well. The camera plates, there is spaces right here where you can just insert plate like that. I'm gonna do both sides, and it's in like that. Awesome. Have to screw these screws in to the standoffs, if you can see right. I'm gonna try to show you guys finishing live. Wow, looks awesome already. All right, so before we move on to the motors, I just wanted to show you guys how sticky this, oh my god, sticky tape really is. So I'm gonna take a battery, we'll put it on there, all right, we'll give it a little push down. No strap, no battery strap. Actually, I'm gonna move on to putting the stack on just so I get an idea of my motor wires and stuff like that. I'm gonna start off by taking the capacitor off. I do not really like having my capacitor right here. Just sprinkle my soldering iron. I'm gonna go ahead and snip up this other capacitor here. I'm just gonna go ahead and film what it looks like making these capacitors that I like doing. So I'm just gonna toss a ton of solder all over the place here. Got both wires on the capacitor like so. I know it might seem a little weird to some people. I noticed another person I bought a drone off built like this. I just loved it. So just to make this pretty and make sure that it works right, I'm gonna put like heat shrink and some tape. All right, so I got the heat shrink on. I'm just gonna obviously shrink it up, wrap some tape around it. I got these wires on. All right, and this stack usually comes with the yellow gummies, but I got purple ones, obviously, from iFlight. I think they're on Amazon. I'm gonna see if they fit. I don't even know. All right, so we've got both our flight controller and ESC gummied up. Looks awesome with the purple. So next, I'm gonna do the soldering of the capacitor. Cut them right there. Just I always never cut too short. Always cut too long on purpose. Just because if you cut a wire too short, either you're redoing it, you have to reorder it, or Okay. I'm basically just gonna throw these motor wires. Obviously, it's gonna go under like that, and it's just gonna. I'm just gonna curl them up a little bit and just add it on right there. Boom. We got the motor wires nice and soldered on. As you can see, I kind of like soldered it so that they can curl a little bit like that. The capacitor will get this little spot right here. I'm gonna wait to do the XT60, so we're gonna actually move on to the motors. I got a lot of different 3D prints. I got from Brain 3D, Nozzle 3D. I just love ordering 3D prints because I don't print my own. So motors are pretty easy. You can line up the holes with the motor holes. So for this, I like to pick two diagonal holes first. So and then I'm just gonna screw them into the motor, make sure it's all lined up. There we go. Finally, I got the two in, so now that should make it really easy to add the other two. We're just gonna go ahead and do the rest of the motors. All right, as you can see, we got all the motors screwed in now with the 3D prints. It's looking pretty good. So next what we're gonna do is that we cut these wires to the length we want them to. You want to stretch it out and then give yourself like I like to give myself like an inch and a half extra wire. Just because if you cut it too short, then you're gonna have to somehow make an extension or something like that. So I don't like going directly to the stack like that. I actually like going around the standoff screw just so that there's a little more protection for the crash. You know, if a stick pokes your drone, you hit a branch, it's around the standoff, so it's kind of curled around and protected and hiding under everything else. The next thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to tin all these pads for the motors just so that they're ready for soldering. This, you kind of just heat up the pad a little bit with the iron and then just feed solder. We got all of these motor pads tinned up with solder and ready to go. But that's how I do my motor wires. I'm gonna redo them just because I have these motor wire covers here. I actually have them on my other build, so I decided to stick with them. They just nicely keep your wires protected. Motor wire cover, if you guys do this, it's pretty simple. You basically just cut it to lengths of your arm, like so, right? You cut it, put the motor wires in, solder, and then you can zip tie it down or do whatever you like. That's what it looks like, how I do my motors. Next thing I wanted to do real quick was I used double-sided tape. It's kind of like this 3M. Um, it's kind of got like a little padding. So I use this and put it under the capacitor, just with a little more cushioning for it. All right, I'm just gonna sit that right where the capacitor is gonna go. And then I'm gonna go ahead and take one little strip of tape. Now, I totally forgot to do this, so I have the front and rear bumper here for the front and rear on the bottom plate. All right, I put the bumper and front bumper on. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the CADX area. Obviously, I had a longer cable installed to this, just for the head tracking gimbal since it's kind of needed. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is solder on our cable for the CADX Vista. The flight controller has a plug, so I'll just have one plug, one side with the plug, and then all I need is ground 10 volts, RX, and TX. That's all I need. So, all right, so we got our cable on the CADX all soldered on. Just gonna give her a little twist. But now that I've done that, I'm gonna go ahead and take my bolts for the CADX and apply it to the center. Before we mount the CADX onto the frame, I'm just gonna put the antenna on now. For this, there's just a little tab right here. You just take the one screw off. You're supposed to run the cable for the antenna through the TPU and see how it fits perfectly. Just push it through a little bit. I'm gonna put a little heat shrink on it. Okay, so before we mount the CADX onto the frame, we're just gonna do the XT60 now. This is gonna be one of the hardest parts, in my opinion. Alright, so for the XT60, you're just gonna want to cut the length you want it to be. I have to make mine a lot shorter or else it'd just be sticking out a lot. I'm actually gonna make it a tad bit shorter. I like to use something with that will hold the wires as you do it. So I'm just gonna grab these helping hands and set it up to how I want it. Just get a little bit decent amount of solder onto the wires. Doesn't have to look perfect. This is not recommended if you get a smoke detector for your XT60s to test them, because this might catch fire if you don't do them right. But I'm just gonna go ahead and test it, so it should make a noise. There we go. Alright, so next thing I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna bolt on the Cadex Vista to the frame. I'm gonna be using these screws and bolts by Newbie Drone. It's made specifically for the Vista, and it actually fits just perfectly for this frame. So, right, and I'm just gonna add the TPU on the standoffs back here. For this, I kind of like to twist up the cable for the antenna, so it's kind of more secure in there. And just put it on the standoffs. We got the antenna on now. I'm just gonna get a little heat shrink, put it on there real quick. Just like that. We're just gonna put a little heat shrink. Make sure it's all shrink. Then you can even just push down to flatten this out while it's still, pretty hot. Just like so. Now it's really secure on there. So we're just gonna put the bolts on the Cadex, and then we should move on to the next. Alright, so I'm just gonna tin up the pads I need to use. So 5-volt ground, and I'm using an LED for the signal. Okay, I got those ready to go. And now we're just gonna cut my wire to my liking. Now I'm just gonna pre-tin the wires just so that they have a little bit of solder on them. It's easier to do everything. Alright, enough LED. And I actually already kind of like wrap this cable up from the gimbal, because I have all this space by the camera, or where the camera is supposed to go, and I'm just gonna stick it on top, and that's where these two will plug in. So boom, boom, boom. So I have to do the receiver now. All right, we got the wires tinned, and so now we're just gonna put whatever color you prefer. I mean, usually black is ground, red is volt, and the other two are TXRs. Yep. All right, so I'm gonna twist this cable up. All right, we're just gonna put some heat shrink so that this stays pretty solid. Solder stay on there. All right. And just like that, you got the heat shrink on. And now I'm just gonna figure out where I'm gonna put this thing. I think I'm gonna put it on top of this hole right here. Receiver antennas right here on the arms under the capacitor. It's really secure there. I put the antennas under the stack, and I'm just gonna have them right here on the arms. I'm just gonna zip tie them down. And so all I have to do now is solder on the receiver and zip tie it down, and then we should be good to go. Alright, I think I got it all soldered on. You can see right here. So basically, I'm done with all the soldering. At this point, just make sure all my cables are plugged in.
I'm just gonna plug it in and make sure everything lights up. Got the two beeps. ELRS lights up. And we're good to go. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in the gimbal and screw everything up. And then we just got beta flight and some configuring to do.
All right, first thing I'm gonna do is set up my receiver. So I'm gonna go to Express LRS configurator, and I actually have really old firmware right now for my radio, so I just downgraded. So obviously I'm gonna change that soon. Um, Device category, I was using Radio Master with the RP3 diversity. And then I just keep it on Betaflight pass through, and all this just keep it on standard um, binding, for example. Just say your binding phrase that you have for your radio so that when you set it up and flash it, it will bind immediately to your radio when you plug in the drone, basically. So I've actually already done this, so I'm just kind of walking through what I did. So once I flash that, we can finally open it up in Betaflight. Just gonna want to plug in your drone, and it should pop up right there. And then the first thing you're gonna want to do is go to your ports. And I just found which serial RX I was using for the DJI, which is usually one. They usually use one for your DJI. And then I'm using UART3 for my receiver. So I just turned that one on, and we were good to go for that. Configuration. I really didn't change anything. I don't do much on Betaflight actually, but the one thing I did need to do is turn on servo tilt via the head tracking gimbal. So once you turn that on, it'll give you the servos tab, and we're gonna show that in a second. But um, receiver, really, you could just check if your radio is all good and set up. Like I said, I've already done all this. I'm just kind of walking through what I would have to do. The servos tab is going to be the hardest part, in my opinion. Um, so for modes, I just do my arm switch. I set up angle just cause in case I have to like, you know, flip into angle and save a crash or something instead, because the head tracking gimbal is a little tricky to get used to. I didn't install a beeper. I thought my flight controller would make a noise when I made a beeper, but it actually doesn't, so I don't even need that really. But then flip over after crash. That's really all I needed. Flip over after crash, arm. That's really it. That's all I needed for servos. Alright, so I'm gonna use an example of my Radio Master Boxer. Um, for this I'm just gonna have to set a channel for the gimbal to basically kind of connect to. So just want to go to model page over to mixes, and then find a channel that you're not using, which mine was 10. I actually didn't really I just saw this on Medlin Drone's instructions. He said for DJI it's TR6. So I put the source as TR6, and I also added on that channel on the switch. It's on the switch for this. It's gonna be have a lower sensitivity um, on the down part of the switch. And then this one, literally just switches to my dial, so I can change the head tracking through my dial. And that's how I set up the Boxer. Alright, and for this part, I really honestly didn't understand it that well. I kind of just knew that one of these channels was going to link to the TR6 source. So basically, I just flipped through each channel and just clicked each one until my head tracking gimbal moved. And at that point, I knew that this is the one that controlled the output for the gimbal. So basically, after I found that one, that was all good to go. One thing I don't remember if I did this before or after, but you have to go to CLI, type in resource, and you're supposed to find the LED pad. Since I used the LED pad, um, LED. So once you find LED, you're gonna want to type in, and then you're gonna want to type in resource again, and then LED. When you type in LED, it'll just pop up right here, LED strip 1, and then you put none at the end. So it says resources freed. So now you're gonna want to type resource servo, and then the number you had after that. All right, and so now you have that LED pad set to the servo basically after you do all that, and then you just hit save the file, and you should be good to go. All right, so finally got the head tracker all linked up, as you can see. Shout out to Medlin Drones. But there you go. That goes all the way up, all the way down. Watch the next video. I'm going to be test flying this, and so if you want to check that out, just wait for it to come out, and yeah.